Well, good morning, Mesa View. I know it's Monday morning. You're not usually used to hearing me on Monday morning, but we know that the feed cut out for about 3 minutes yesterday, right at the start of the sermon. And so we wanted to give you the sermon in its entirety, and that way you would have that with a little bit of wisdom for your week. And so let me start with the second scripture reading, which is the story from which I'll preach. And it comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 28. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there for a night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. And he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth, the top of it reaching to heaven. And the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you, to your offspring, and your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome this place is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put under his head, and set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. This is the good news of Jesus Christ, for which we're thankful to God. Let me tell you a story about a dream. It's the summer of 1865, and a chemist named August Kekule is working in his lab, and he is stuck. He has hit a wall. Kekule is studying the compound benzene, which we use a lot today in modern life. You probably don't have it in your home, or you wouldn't want it in your home because it's toxic. It can cause cancer. But a lot of modern life happens because of benzene. It's used in the synthesis of plastics and composites and other materials that we use every day, largely because of Kekule's work. And Kekule is studying benzene, trying to understand the atomic structure of the compound. And he, like I said, he is stuck. His research has hit a wall, and he is not making progress anymore. When he mixes things with benzene, they don't react the way that he expects them to. Nothing is working the way he thinks it should. And so Kekule does what any rational person would do in such a situation. He goes home and he takes a nap. If you're ever stuck in life, take a nap. A nap can be one of the best tools to get unstuck. Take it from me. I do this sometimes myself. So August Kekule heads home for an afternoon siesta, and as he nods off, he begins to dream. And basically what happens, this is a little oversimplification, but basically what happens is he dreams about a snake that is eating its own tail. It's circled around, and it's sort of munching on its own tail. And after dreaming for this a little while, he wakes up and basically he thinks to himself, wow, that was a wild dream. And then right after that, he has a sort of eureka moment where all of a sudden he understands his problem in a new way. And it all has to do with this dream. He starts to realize that his brain is trying to tell him something, that the benzene molecule that he is studying, and he had thought of as a chain of atoms, extending out, isn't a chain at all. As he thought about that dream and the snake that had rounded around itself to eat its own tail, he realized that benzene as an atom, as a molecule, is a ring structure. And so he runs back to his lab and starts running the same tests, and sure enough, benzene reacts exactly the way that it should if it's a ring instead of a chain. This giant of a chemist is celebrated for the rest of his life for his insight. And where did it come from? It came from some random dream on a random afternoon when August Kekule decided to go home and take a nap. Dreams are powerful. In fact, everybody has dreams. Even if you don't think you do, what's happening is you probably just don't remember your dreams. Every time you go into REM sleep, you dream. People, within 5 minutes of waking, most of us forget at least half of what we dreamt about. And within 10 minutes of waking up, we tend to forget about 90%. And in fact, even people who are blind dream. They just dream a little differently depending on when they were struck blind. If a person was blinded after they were born and they spent some portion of their life with sight, they'll continue to dream basically the way most of us do, and they'll be able to see and have sight in their dreams. If a person was blind from birth, they will still dream, but what the brain does is it doesn't use sight because there's nothing to base it off of. And instead, people who are born blind from birth will have dreams that are rich with sounds and smells and tastes and touch. All the different senses fill in where vision isn't there. The few people who actually don't dream are usually people with psychological disorders. And what's really strange is that all of us, we really only dream about what we know. Our brain really doesn't invent anything new in a dream. Instead, what it does is dreaming is sort of the process of the brain organizing and categorizing. And so neurologists who study dreams think that sometimes you have those dreams that are full of mysterious strangers or people that you don't know, but the people who studied it don't think that those people are strangers at all, and we aren't inventing their faces. In fact, probably every person you've seen in a dream is probably someone that you've seen in real life, and you just don't remember. That crazy killer that was in the nightmare you had a few weeks ago, he may have had the face of the cashier at the grocery store that your family would go to when you were 5 years old and who would always check out your family at that store. Having seen hundreds of thousands of faces over the course of a lifetime, our brains have a treasure trove of faces to supply the characters of our dreams when we do dream. Not only that, but not all of us dream in color. About 12% of normal-sighted people dream exclusively in black and white, which I think is absolutely wild, and I think that would be really interesting. Most people will have between 4 and 7 dreams per night, and men dream differently than women. Men tend to dream mostly about other men. About 70% of the characters that men dream about are other men in their dreams, whereas women tend to dream about men and women in equal proportion. All of that said, you don't have permission right now to fall asleep, just to see if that's true. Dreams are also important. In 2009, the American Psychological Association reported that just over half of all people had made at least one major life decision based on a dream that they had had. And in fact, they presented a scenario in the same study, and they asked 182 Boston commuters what would cause them to change a flight plan or change an airline ticket. They raised 4 scenarios for them. The government raising the national threat level, consciously imagining the plane crashing, learning an actual flight had crashed along the same route, or dreaming about a plane crash in the recent past. And the commuters responded, by and large, that the dream would be just as unsettling as knowing there was a real crash along the same route, and much more unsettling than imagining a plane crashing or even a government warning. So dreams are important, they're mysterious, they're formative. At times they can be therapeutic, and they can be a catalyst in our lives. Now, today, as we pick up with the story of Jacob, we find him having quite a dream of his own. It's maybe the most famous dream in the Bible. Now, you remember last week that we saw that Jacob was a schemer. I know that a lot of times we think of the people in the Bible and we think, oh, those people must have been holier than us or better than us or superhuman in some way. They always did the right things. But Jacob is confirmation that in a lot of ways, the people that are in the Bible are a lot like us, because Jacob was a schemer. His name literally means grabby or sort of a grubby supplanter. It's a name with a meaning. And Jacob engages in this nasty trick on his brother, and even worse, on his father, who is dying. And if you remember the story from last week, let's be honest. This is a family that today we would call dysfunctional. It is not about love. It is not about being together. It is power play after power play in this family. It's not a healthy relational unit. And when Jacob tricks his brother Esau, Esau is justifiably angry, really angry, so angry that he basically starts planning to kill his brother as soon as his father dies. So Jacob has to flee. And he gets out of town with the help of his mother, who is his partner in crime in all of these schemes. And his mother cooks up this story about how Jacob needs to find a wife, and the women around here, they just aren't the right kind of girls. And so let's send Jacob back to the home country, because this is a family of immigrants in the land of Canaan. Let's send him back to the home country where he can find a nice girl. We'll send him back to these cousins that I have. And so Jacob leaves under those auspices, but essentially he is fleeing out into the desert. He doesn't have time to pack. He doesn't have time to bring anything. He just has to leave quickly without much notice. And I mean, if you think about where Canaan is, which today would be the modern area where Israel is, there is only one direction that you can run. You can't go west because the Mediterranean is right there. You go east. And that's where he goes. Deep, deep into the east. So Haran, this place where he runs to, is deep in the desert, probably somewhere today near Jordan. And it's dry, it's hot, it's dusty. We learned last week that Jacob, the Bible describes him as a quiet man who lived among the tents, which is sort of a euphemism saying that Jacob was sort of effeminate. He is not a camper, okay? He likes his luxuries. He is not built for life out in the sticks, which is exactly where he is now. And so this should be a really low point in his life. How low? Well, when night falls, the only place he can find to sleep is he finds a rock and he rests his head on it and he lays down to go to sleep. This is not the height of comfort. Frankly, it's not a bad metaphor for hard-headed Jacob who never seems to learn. And I have to imagine that rock pillows, maybe they're not so great for your spine, but they are the perfect material for being conducive for dreaming. And so the text says that in Jacob's dream, he sees a ladder. Probably, maybe not even necessarily a ladder because the word is ambiguous. It might be a ramp or a staircase. Think of the great ziggurats that existed in the Babylonian Empire at this time when Jacob is alive, these gigantic pyramids where people would worship their gods. And that's sort of what the implication is that Jacob sees something like this, only it is the biggest ziggurat of them all, and it extends all the way up into the heavens. And as Jacob looks up along it, he can see angels, the messengers of God, going back and forth and carrying out all of God's business. But most importantly, Jacob sees God himself. And God is ready with a speech for him. And here's what God says, and in so many words, a slight paraphrase, but God says, I am the Lord. I'm the God of your father Abraham. I'm the God of your father Isaac. He doesn't say, I'm your God too, because we know Jacob's religious convictions are pretty ambiguous themselves. Then he says, I'm going to give the ground that you're sleeping on to your descendants, and you're not just going to have some kids. Those children are going to grow into this nation that will be as numerous as the grains of the sand, and I'm going to give them this land and bless them with it. I'm going to give you this blessing, and then you are going to go and be blessings for others. So not only am I going to bless you, but you all are going to be blessings for others. Now, so here's the thing about stories. Stories work on the basis of expectations, how they're met or how you are surprised when they're not met. And I don't know that I expect God to bless Jacob the way that he does. Jacob's been lousy so far, and God is saying, I am with you. I'm going to heap all these blessings on you. But even more, after Jacob gets this extraordinary message of good news, you would think that he would have some kind of religious conversion or awakening, and that doesn't happen either, because Jacob doesn't what he says in response, it's not particularly religious. He doesn't repent of all these things he's done. He basically, what he says is, boy, God is present in this place. I know that, so I better be careful here because this God could turn on me at any moment. And then about a verse after he stops, he makes this vow that if God is watching over him, then someday he'll go back to his father's house and gets what's his. At best, Jacob is saying, well, if God scratches my back, I'll scratch his back too. And some people have the gift of discernment. When it comes to dreams, Jacob's own son, his youngest son, his favorite son, Joseph, would be a dreamer too, and he would be able to have these dreams where God would speak to him and parlay what he understands from those dreams, where he can go from being a slave to basically the prime minister of a pharaoh. Some people can seize what's essential in a complicated discussion or a confused story and understand what's really needed, and at the same time understand what's practical. And that is not, flat out, not Jacob in this story, because Jacob is in a crisis even if he doesn't know it, and he doesn't know what's needed, and he sure doesn't understand what's practical in this situation. He is at a low, and all he's thinking about is how he can get back and get his inheritance. I mean, have you ever heard someone, maybe in a moment of testimony or maybe just talking to you, and they said, say something along the lines of, it took hitting rock bottom before they could figure out that they needed help. And that's a beautiful moment when that happens in people's lives. But what if Jacob, what happens in anyone's life when they hit rock bottom and they say to themselves, maybe I can keep digging a little bit more? That's a scary moment. And we're about to find out with Jacob. I mean, what if Jacob had experienced this dream, realized that God was going to bless him immeasurably? What if he had said, why am I going to these means, to these extraordinary measures to get an inheritance? That, let's be honest, he's scrambling around doing these sneaking things for a few goats. God's going to bless him with a land, with a people, with a nation, and Jacob is still concerned with making sure he gets this little family inheritance. What if Jacob had gone home, offered to split the inheritance, made peace with his brother, rather than doubling down on his loss? I've seen so much change, and I bet you have too, over these last 12 months. There's been so much, on the one hand, there's been so much good that's happened in the midst of this hardship. When you think about the medical staff who have been working overtime for a year now so that people would receive care, or the people who invented a vaccine, 0 to 60 from scratch in a matter of months. A vaccine had never been developed before in less than 4 years. Multiple companies and organizations invented vaccines in a matter of months. Or when you think of the people who pitched in to make sure that people had food or had the things that they needed. Let me just brag about a few people here at Mesa View. There's a guy named Jim who comes to the 8:30 service, Jim Bauman. And I hear from all kinds of people, homebound people, some of the older ladies who it was a little scary to get out for groceries. I would hear from them, Jim just dropped by and went to pick up groceries for me. Or let me tell you about another guy. His name is Andy. He comes and he sings sometimes in the first service, Andy Robertson, who has been writing to people and helping people to feel connected even when they can't come to church right now. There's been so many more, by the way. I mean, the good has been there and it's been evident. We've been blessed. But let's be honest, in our culture at large, we've been blessed beyond measure. And yet, so often we have failed to grasp that blessing, and instead we've done some grasping of our own, being divided and trying to supplant others. We went into this time angry and divided. We can be honest about that. Just like Jacob's family, we were every bit as divided. You can pick the divisions that you want to label, however you want to label them, Republican, Democrat, urban, rural, black or white. And in a lot of ways, when God invited us to stop, to pause, to consider what justice would really look like, to reconsider our trajectory, in a lot of ways, our culture has said thanks, but no thanks. We are going to keep carving the world up so we can get what's coming to us. And look at the way now that we're angrier and more divided and more anxious and more fearful because of that. The thing is, we have agency in what we choose. We're not victims. Jacob wasn't a victim. He chose to be sneaky. We have agency too. You can lean into the anger and the fear and the things that are driving our culture right now, or you can lend a hand and pitch in. You get a choice in that. The gift that God gives us and has given us and will continue to give us is that here we are in this time in the desert where I feel like God has invited us to pause and think about what we're doing. We're still in a little bit of a pause. You know, the 18th century founder of the Hasidic Jewish movement and tradition was a man named Baal Shem Tov, and he said that forgetting leads to exile, and remembering is the secret of redemption. Forgetting leads to exile, and remembering leads to redemption. So before real life comes roaring back, and I don't know about you, but I can hear the roar getting ever closer. Our normal lives are coming back very quickly now. So as that roar gets closer all the time, what do you want to remember? What do you want to remember about yourself? What do you want to remember about the world around you? What are the deep truths that God might be whispering to you right now that you want to remember about God? Because what we remember or what we forget and we just get back to the show, that's going to define the months and years ahead. We're in a pivotal time right now, right at this very moment, where we get to decide what our lives and our communities and our nation and our world will look like for years to come. So before we just jump right back into it, take a moment here in the desert and ask yourself what you want to remember. Is there something that God wants you to know? Take some time to listen. We've still got some time. Take some time to listen. Will you pray with me? And we'll start with a moment of silent prayer. To listen. Gracious God, we are busy little people sometimes. Plans and schemes and ways of getting what's ours. We thank you that you've created a situation where we have to slow down and listen. And even then, some of us have held our hands over our ears. But help us to hear your voice in this time. Help us to hear your vision and your dream for what the world could be like and what we could be like. And as we emerge from this time of pandemic and shelter, help us to remember your dream for us and to make it reality. Amen.